If someone handed you a statement tomorrow that showed exactly $1 million sitting under your name, no strings attached, what would your first thought be? Relief. Pride. A quiet sense of, "I've finally made it." Most people feel a rush in that moment, a belief that the hard part is over and life will now run on autopilot. But here's the uncomfortable question almost no one asks right away: what does that number actually do for your life, day after day, year after year? Because money isn't freedom by default, it's potential, and potential can either be structured carefully or slowly wasted without you even noticing. Let me tell you a short story. A few years ago, I met someone who had done everything right on paper. Steady career, disciplined saver, no wild financial mistakes. By their early 60s, they crossed that $1 million mark and felt invincible. They told friends, quietly but proudly, "I'm set." The interesting part wasn't what they bought or how they lived. It was how quickly that sense of security started to crack once real life entered the picture. Markets moved, expenses rose, small decisions added up, nothing catastrophic happened, and yet, the feeling of control they expected never fully arrived. That's when they realized something important: the number itself was never the finish line. Understanding the number was. This is where most conversations about money go wrong. We're trained to chase milestones instead of systems. We celebrate round numbers as if they magically change reality. 1 million sounds like freedom because it's clean, simple, and culturally loaded. But money doesn't care about symbolism. It only responds to structure, time, and behavior. So instead of asking whether $1 million is enough, the better question is this: what kind of life does it actually support, and under what conditions? Imagine your money as a quiet employee that works for you every day. It doesn't complain, it doesn't call in sick, but it also doesn't work miracles. If you ask it to work too hard, too fast, it burns out. If you give it clear rules and reasonable expectations, it can support you for decades. The mistake most people make is assuming their money will produce steady, predictable income just because they've reached a certain balance. In reality, markets don't pay salaries. They fluctuate. Some years are generous, some are brutal, and many are painfully average. This is why relying on whatever the market gives me is a dangerous mindset. One year your investments might grow significantly, and it feels like confirmation that everything is fine. The next year, that growth disappears, right when you still need money to live. The emotional whiplash alone can push people into bad decisions. They sell at the wrong time, withdraw too much, or panic into overly conservative choices that quietly erode their future. So planners and researchers spent decades studying a simpler question: how much can you reasonably take from a portfolio each year without destroying it? Not in perfect conditions, not in best-case scenarios, but across good markets, bad markets, inflation, recessions, and long retirements. Out of that research came a guideline that isn't exciting, but it is practical. A withdrawal rate that aims to balance longevity with livability. If you start with $1 million and take around 4% in the first year, that's about $40,000. From there, you adjust that amount slowly to keep up with rising prices, not market performance. Some years your portfolio grows more than you withdraw. Other years it shrinks, but the structure is designed to survive both. This approach isn't about maximizing pleasure in any single year. It's about minimizing regret over 30. Now pause for a moment and sit with that number: $40,000. For some people, that feels uncomfortably small. For others, it feels workable, especially when paired with simpler living. The emotional reaction you have to that figure says a lot about your expectations, and expectations, more than math, are what determine whether retirement feels calm or constantly stressful. Here's where perspective matters. Very few people rely on one source of income in later life. Most have some form of public benefit, pension, or part-time income layered on top. When you combine multiple streams, the picture changes. That same $40,000 stops being the whole story and starts becoming the foundation. And foundations don't need to be flashy. They need to be solid. But income isn't the only variable. Time is the silent one. Retiring earlier stretches the same money across more years. Retiring later compresses it. Living longer than expected can quietly turn a comfortable plan into a fragile one. None of us knows our timeline in advance, which is why flexibility matters more than precision. The goal isn't to predict the future perfectly. It's to avoid cornering yourself. This is also why location plays such a powerful role. The same income creates wildly different lives depending on where you are. In some places, it supports comfort and freedom. In others, it barely covers basics. Choosing where and how to live is one of the most effective financial decisions available, and it doesn't require earning more or investing smarter. It requires clarity. Healthcare is another reality check that forces humility. Costs tend to rise as we age, not fall. Coverage helps, but it rarely covers everything. Unexpected needs don't ask permission before showing up. This is where having a buffer, not just an income stream, becomes essential. Money's greatest value isn't luxury, it's optionality, the ability to respond instead of react. And then there's psychology. The part no spreadsheet can model. Some people feel anxious carrying debt, even low-interest debt, and that anxiety spills into every decision. Others feel anxious watching their account balances fluctuate, even if the long-term plan is sound. There's no universal emotional profile. The right plan is the one you can stick with when headlines get loud and markets get messy. One of the quiet dangers of retirement planning is assuming you'll become a different person later, more disciplined, more patient, less emotional. In reality, you bring your habits with you. If spending crept up during your working years, it won't magically stop. If you avoided looking at numbers because they made you uncomfortable, that avoidance doesn't disappear either. Awareness, not denial, is what creates stability. This is why $1 million can feel either empowering or fragile. The difference isn't the amount. It's the relationship you have with it. People who view money as a tool tend to design their lives intentionally. People who view it as a scoreboard tend to chase reassurance that never quite arrives. A calm retirement doesn't come from extracting every possible dollar. It comes from alignment. Your spending matches your values. Your income matches your needs. Your expectations match reality. When those three line up, even modest numbers feel supportive. When they don't, even large numbers feel tight. So what does $1 million really mean? It means you've built something. It means you've bought time, not unlimited time, but meaningful time. It means you have room to make choices instead of reacting to emergencies. It doesn't mean the work of thinking is over. It means the work becomes quieter, slower, and more strategic. The people who struggle most in retirement aren't the ones who saved too little. They're often the ones who never adjusted their mental model. They kept waiting for a moment when money would remove all uncertainty. That moment doesn't exist. But peace does. And peace comes from understanding what your money can do, what it can't, and designing your life in the space between those two truths. If there's one idea worth carrying forward, it's this: financial freedom isn't about reaching a number. It's about reducing the gap between what you need and what you have. The smaller that gap becomes, the less dramatic your life needs to be. And in that quiet, undramatic space, many people discover something they weren't expecting at all. Contentment doesn't require extravagance. It requires clarity. So don't ask whether $1 million is enough in some abstract sense. Ask what kind of life you want it to support, how long you want it to last, and how much flexibility you need along the way. Those answers matter far more than the headline number. And once you see that clearly, money stops feeling like a finish line and starts feeling like what it was always meant to be: a steady, reliable partner in a well-designed life.